Welcome, YouTubers, to another episode in my Grammar Hero series. In today's video, I'm going to start giving you an overview of all the factoring techniques with which you should be familiar in order to be successful in the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. More specifically, I'm going to discuss the quadratic formula in today's video. Later this week, I'll upload videos in which I discuss factoring quadratics when the leading coefficient is 1 as well as not 1. I'll talk about factoring by grouping, and finally, I'll discuss how to factor when you're given the difference of two squares. In addition, I'm going to include a link to this factoring guide in the description of all those videos in case you find it helpful to look at as we discuss each of these topics. All that said, let's go ahead and get started with today's video. To start, again, we're going to talk about using the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations. And in case you haven't seen it in a while, the quadratic formula is this. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and that's all over 2a. Again, that is the quadratic formula. Now, in case you're wondering where you get a, b, and c from, again, all quadratic equations take this form, ax squared plus bx plus c. And as you can see, the value in front of your squared variable is going to be your a. The value, our coefficient in front of the variable that's raised to the first power is going to be your b. And then your whole number is going to be your c. So if we take a look at number 1, we can see we have m squared minus 5m minus 14. Well, it's pretty easy to identify our c. Again, that's going to be negative 14. It's pretty easy to find our b. Again, that's going to be negative 5. But that said, we don't have a coefficient in front of m squared. Whenever you have no coefficient in front of the variable squared, you have to know that it's simply going to be 1, insofar as 1 times m squared is just m squared. So in this case, we know our a is going to be 1. With all those values identified, it's a matter of just plugging them into the quadratic formula and then solving accordingly. So let's go ahead and start by writing the quadratic formula down. Again, that's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and that's all over 2a. Our b, as we identified, is negative 5, so that's going to look like this. Negative of negative 5. Of course, that's plus or minus b squared. Again, b is negative 5, so that's negative 5 squared minus 4. Again, we said a was 1, and c is negative 14. And again, all this is over 2 times a, which is the same as 2 times 1. Okay, with everything plugged in, we can start solving this. Negative of negative 5 just becomes positive, so we just have positive 5 plus or minus square root of negative 5 squared. Negative 5 times negative 5, and negative times a negative is going to be positive. So this is simply going to be 25 minus negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 14 is going to be positive. Again, negative times a negative is positive. 14 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. Carry the 1. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So this becomes 25 plus 56. And again, this is all over 2a, or 2. Again, 2 times 1 is just 2. In case we need to do it off to the side, let's go ahead and do so. 25 plus 56. 5 plus 6 is 11, so you bring down a 1 and carry a 1. 5 plus 2 is 7, plus 1 is 8. So this becomes 5 plus or minus the square root of 81 all over 2. Okay, we should notice that the square root of 81 is simply going to be 9. So this becomes 5 plus or minus 9 over 2. And this plus or minus tells us to split our solution two ways. The first way is going to be 5 plus 9 over 2. And the second way is going to be 5 minus 9 over 2. In other words, you can see that we split that plus or minus into two separate solutions there. 5 plus 9, as we know, is going to be 14. Again, that's over 2. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So we know one of our solutions is 7. 5 minus 9, however, is going to be negative 4. Again, that's over 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. So we know the other solution in this case is negative 2. And that, as you just saw, is how you use the quadratic equation. For the rest of the problems in this part of the video, there's going to be no tricks as to how to solve them. So if you want to do 2 through 4 on your own and then play the video to see if you and I came up with the same solutions, that's a good idea. As far as number 5 goes, I put number 5 in this video to try to show you some cases where the quadratic formula breaks down, which may happen on the ASVAB. So if you want to do 2 through 4 on your own, that's a good idea. Again, it's just plugging these things into the quadratic formula. And then I'll have some new things to say about number 5. All right, so again, the easiest thing to do to start solving equations with the quadratic formula is to identify your a, b, and c accordingly. Again, if a is not there, you always know it's going to be 1. B in this case is going to include the negative, so it's going to be negative 4. And c is simply going to be positive 4. Again, we're plugging these things into the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And of course, that's all over 2a. Again, negative b is negative 4, so we're going to do negative of negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is positive 4. And again, this is all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 1. Let's work this out. Starting with the negative of negative 4, negative times negative positive, so we know this is going to be positive 4 plus or minus. Let's work out what's under the radical. Negative 4 squared becomes 16. Again, a negative times a negative is positive. And now we have negative 4 times 1, which is negative 4, times 4, which is going to be negative 16. And again, this is over 2 times 1, which is just 2. And now we can see we have, let's keep working this out. We have 4 plus or minus 16 minus 16. That's going to be 0 all over 2. Since we're neither adding nor subtracting, since you can't take anything away from 4 with the 0, this just becomes 4 over 2, which is the same as just 2. In other words, the only solution to this problem is 2. Okay, so this one just has one solution, whereas this first one had 2 solutions. Okay? All right, number 3, again, identify your a, b, and c to start. A is 2, as we can clearly see. B is 2, and C is negative 12. Remember to include the negatives as necessary. Again, we're just plugging all this into the quadratic formula. That's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Again, b is 2, so we're going to plug that in. Plus or minus b squared, which is 2 squared minus 4. A is 2. And then c is negative 12. And again, that's all over 2 times a. In this case, a is 2, so this is 2 times 2. Let's keep working this out. Again, negative times positive 2 is going to just be negative 2. Plus or minus. Let's work out what's under the radical next. Again, 2 squared is simply 4. And then we have negative 4 times positive 2, which is going to be 8, or negative 8, times negative 12, which is going to become positive. So this is going to be plus. Again, 4 times 2 is 8, or negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 12. Let's see what that's going to be. 12 times 8. 8 times 2 is 16. Carry the 1. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 1 is 9. So we can see this is 4 plus 96, all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Let's keep working this out. We have negative 2, and let me go up a little bit so we have more room. This is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 96 plus 4 is the square root of 100 over 4. The square root of 100 we should know is 10, so this becomes negative 2 plus or minus 10 over 4. And as we saw earlier, this breaks into 2 different solutions. We have negative 2 plus 10 over 4, and then negative 2 minus 10 over 4. Let's work those out. Negative 2 plus 10 becomes 8 over 4. 8 divided by 4 is simply 2. So one of our solutions is 2. Negative 2 minus 10 becomes negative 12 over 4. Negative divided by positive is going to be negative. Negative 12 divided by 4 more specifically is negative 3. So we can see that this one has 2 solutions, specifically 2 and negative 3. Okay, number 4, let's go ahead and work on that one. Again, start by identifying your A, B, and C. Again, A is 2, B is negative 3, and C is negative 5. We're going to plug those in, of course, to the quadratic formula. Again, that's negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so let's plug things in accordingly. B is negative 3, so that's negative of negative 3 plus or minus b squared, which is negative 3 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 5. And again, that's all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 2. All right, let's simplify this so we can get our solutions. Negative of negative 3 just becomes 3. Again, negative times negative is a positive. And again, let's work out what's under the radical. Negative 3 squared is 9. Again, we have a negative times a negative, which becomes positive. Negative 4 times negative 5 is going to be positive 20. 20 times 2 will give you 40. So this is going to be plus 40 all over 2 times 2, which is 4. Let's keep working this out. 3 plus or minus square root of 4 plus 9, or 40 plus 9 is 49. Again, that's all over 4. We should know the square root of 49 is 7, so this becomes 3 plus or minus 7 over 4. And again, this breaks into two different solutions, notably 3 plus 7 over 4, as well as 3 minus 7 over 4. Let's work those out. 3 plus 7 is 10 over 4. If we divide top and bottom by 2, we can see that reduces to 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So our one solution is 5 over 2. 3 minus 7 is negative 4 over 4. Negative divided by a positive is going to be negative, so this is going to become negative 1. Therefore, our solutions to this one are 5 over 2 and negative 1. So again, this one has two solutions, specifically 5 over 2 and negative 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on number 5, and we're going to do that off to the side since we're running out of room here. And let's do that. Let's go ahead and erase this so we can work on that one. All right, so I'm going to rewrite this one up here so we can have some room to work with. Again, 5 says m squared minus 9m plus 24. Again, to start, we want to identify our a, b, and c. This would be our a, 1. Our b would be negative 9. And our c would be 24. Let's plug those things into the quadratic formula. Again, that's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. We've identified a, b, and c accordingly, so let's go ahead and plug those things in. Negative b, or b is negative 9, so let's plug that in. So we have the negative of negative 9 plus or minus the square root of negative 9 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 24, all over 2a, and a is 1, so just 2 times 1. Let's go ahead and start working this out. Negative of negative 9 is just going to be positive 9. Again, that's plus or minus the square root. Let's work out what's in the radical. Negative 9 squared becomes 81. Now we have negative 4 times 1, which is negative 4. Negative 4 times positive 24. We know that's going to be negative. 24 times 4 is 16. Carry the 1. 4 times 2 is 8 plus 1 is 9. So this becomes 96 all over 2. Again, 2 times 1 is just 2. Now here we have to be mindful of the fact that 81 minus 96 is going to result in a negative number. So to answer this one, number 5, we would stop and we would write no real solutions. Okay? Similarly, if you were asked to factor this, you would say, in light of the fact that we have a negative under a radical, that this equation would not be factorable. So just be mindful of the fact that if this number under the radical ever becomes negative, you're either going to have no real solutions or the equation's not going to be factorable. Okay? So right here, we can't proceed because you don't learn about imaginary numbers until advanced math classes. So in this case, no real solutions is our answer. Okay, so that's that one. All right, so that's all I have for you in this video. Again, in this video, I wanted to discuss specifically the quadratic formula in terms of solving equations. I hope you found it helpful. If you find the content that I'm posting to my channel helpful, by all means, please consider subscribing to my channel. Throughout the rest of the week, I'll upload videos in which I work on factoring quadratics when a is 1, that is the leading coefficient's 1, when the leading coefficient's not 1, factoring by grouping, and factoring the difference of two squares. All that said, I'm going to go ahead and cut you loose.
Konnichiwa.